Games have got off to a great start in 2024. Dragon's Dogma 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Helldivers 2, and a ton more have kept the good times of 2023 rolling. But it does feel, as spring begins to sprung, like we're hitting a bit of a dry spell when it comes to the bigger releases. Thankfully, there is plenty to look forward to going into the second quarter of the year, and one of the biggest games on the horizon is Hades 2. The sequel to Supergiant Games' absolute blockbuster of a roguelike has been one of my personal most anticipated games ever since it got a surprise reveal drop back at the Game Awards. But there's been a whole other set of Game Awards since then, and news has been a little thin on the ground. Thankfully, with the year finally rolling into April, that should be about to change. Hades 2 has been slated for launch into early access in Q2 of 2024, and now that we're in April, Q2 has officially begun, and I'm chomping at the bit to get my hands on it. So with that in mind, I thought I'd take a gander at everything we know about Supergiant's roguelike sequel so far, as well as some of the many things we don't. So like the vid if you're excited for Hades 2, and let's drop in. The first thing to make clear is that releasing in early access doesn't mean a bare bones version of the game. Supergiant says that Hades 2 will have at least as much content from day one in early access as the original game did back when it launched in early access on Steam. And even though early access inherently means a game is not yet complete, Supergiant have promised to do everything they can to make Hades 2 worth our while as soon as we can play it in any capacity. As they said, the original Hades also had an early access, as have plenty of super successful games in recent years, Baldur's Gate 3 perhaps the most prominent recent example. And the idea is to give players the option to contribute feedback in the lead up to launch and hopefully make the game better as the devs add more and more stuff to it. So the big question, when will early access kick off? Supergiant have promised the exact date, the price and system requirements will be detailed closer to launch, but we do know that the plan as it stands is to have a much smaller technical test that a handful of players will take part in to make sure the game actually functions when exposed to a player base. Supergiant said that the test will be limited only to a relatively small subset of players who express interest in participating, but there have been no details yet on how to sign up for that. Once that finally goes live, we should have more of an idea on when early access will actually be set for launch. The first Hades was in early access for 2 years, but given that Hades 2 uses a similar system for its combat and gameplay, chances are we'll be looking at a significantly shorter period before the game's ready to leave the oven of Tartarus and get its full release. But the release window is only half the story. Literally. With Zagreus seemingly putting up his flaming feet for the sequel, we've got a brand new main character with new weapons, new boons, new Greek gods, and a whole new story to play out. So let's take a little dive into them, shall we? The mysterious goddess we'll be playing as is Melina, one of the huge crowd of minor gods and goddesses in the Greek pantheon, and while she was never considered a big shot, her domain fits the bill for an underworld-focused adventure. She also has comparatively little official mythology surrounding her, so while we do know a few details about her family history and godly powers, the complete lack of information about her background makes her a perfect pick for Hades 2's protagonist. What we do know is that Melina is a chthonic goddess, meaning of the underworld, obviously, and is often associated with nightmares as well as madness, ghosts, and lost souls. She leads an army of the dead, has strong connections to funeral rites, and in fact one of the factors of her domain is honouring the dead, so it's easy to see she has a strong connection to Hades. Although family history actually tends to vary from myth to myth, the generally accepted ancestry is that she's a daughter of Persephone and Hades, completing that link with Zagreus as his sister by blood. The question, of course, is are brother and sister on amicable terms? She clearly has a better relationship with Hades than Zagreus ever had, at least before the events of the original Hades, at least if the trailer is anything to go by. But even if Zag isn't willing to help, we know that Melina will be getting plenty of help from a bunch of new gods from the Greek pantheon, including Hecate. The goddess of magic, witchcraft, the night, the moon, and necromancy. She's a deity that Melina is actually often confused with, so the connection makes sense. In terms of where the Hades 2 story will lead us, there are a lot of theories, but most of it is conjecture at this point. A Supergiant developer did at least confirm that it is Hades chained up and captured by Kronos, so we do at least have that going for us. And we also know that the sequel takes place sometime after the events of the first game, with Kronos, the Titan of Time and wicked father to Hades and his brothers, escaping from imprisonment in the underworld and snagging his son, or maybe even sons, we don't see Zeus or Poseidon in the trailer, in chains. That said, if Kronos truly was trapped in the underworld, maybe this time we'll be fighting our way down into Tartarus and deeper still, rather than trying to break out. Outside of the story, if anything, gameplay is even thinner on the ground. Judging from what little gameplay we saw in the one and only trailer we've had so far, It looks like Supergiant are really steering into the magic side of things, which does make sense given Melinoe and Hecate's affiliation with magic and necromancy. So it looks like we'll be taking down enemies with powerful sorceries and magical abilities granted by a brand new colourful cast of Greek gods from the Pantheon. Alongside the standard array of weapons, we got a brief look at including a double set of daggers and what looks like some kind of staff. So it'll be a nice breath of Elysium fresh air beyond the weapons that we've got used to with Zagreus. And that's it. I know it's not nearly enough, but that's everything we currently know about Hades 2. But hopefully, if the timeline stays in check, it won't be too much longer before we know more. Chuck this vid a like if you're hyped to find out more about Hades 2. Stick with us to keep up to date as soon as anything new about the game comes out. And while you're with us at GG Recon, YouTube is recommending the perfect video just for you, so check that out here.